And take a look at this live look of former President Trump speaking at his Florida residence and country club, Mar-a-Lago. We're going to bring you highlights as soon as we have them from Donald Trump. He's now picked up another win in the state of Massachusetts. That is Trump's 11th win tonight, dominating in the field over Nikki Haley. We also talked to voters after they cast their ballots. We also found that many of them feel angry about how things are going in this country. So let's bring in our CBS News Elections and Surveys Executive Director, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, good to see you. I know you have been pouring through all of the numbers, and Trump has remade the Republican Party in his image. What do the numbers show tonight?
Indeed. Good to see you, Nora. Let me start with this because it's just so important to his voter base. Did Joe Biden win legitimately in 2020? I'll show you a North Carolina exit poll, but it's typical of what we see nationwide. Republicans saying no. 3/4 of Republicans saying no. They don't think Joe Biden won legitimately. And what's important about this is that they have heard Donald Trump's unproven, false claims about the 2020 election. And that leads into this. When we ask people, in this case, North Carolina, is Donald Trump fit to be president, even if convicted of a crime? The Republican primary voters there are saying, yes, he is. And the reason they feel that way is that they think that these charges against him are politically motivated, and they think that he had a legitimate claim to try to stay in office. And so that underpins why they say yes, even if he's convicted, Nora.
And Anthony, let me ask you about independents. We know they are a larger part of the electorate. More than 40% of the voters identify themselves as independents. Either of these candidates will have to win them in order to win in a general election. What are we hearing from them tonight?
So two things. One is look at the way that this has shifted from 2020, where Joe Biden performed well, won independents, and now our latest CBS News national polling in which Trump is up among them. Part of that is the economy. That's a big part. Part of that is immigration. That's a big part of this. So this is obviously going to be a big part to watch. And one thing I will add quickly is watch the Nikki Haley vote tonight, because in the Republican primaries where independents are coming in, they are supporting Nikki Haley in larger numbers. And she's going to argue, even though she's not on track to get the nomination, she's going to argue that that means Republicans are leaving votes on the table, that she would be able to pick up those voters that Donald Trump cannot, Nora.
Really interesting, Anthony Salvanto. That's why we love those exit polls. Thank you so much. Let's bring in our strategist tonight, Democratic strategist Joel Payne and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez. Great to have both of you. Joel, let's talk first about President Biden. He is facing the lowest approval ratings since Jimmy Carter at his term. He is underwater when it comes to immigration, the economy, dealing with foreign policy and the Israel-Hamas war. What do Democrats need to do to shore up his support?
Yeah, Nora, one thing I've learned not to do is fight with polls or pollsters. They are what they are. They don't look great for the president. I do think what he needs is a couple things. One, he needs pretty quick resolution of the situation in Gaza. That is putting a lot of stress and strain on his coalition. A lot of the fall off you see in a lot of public polls, even our CBS polls, in Biden's coalition is from traditional Democratic constituencies, young voters, voters of color. Obviously, we had the recent Michigan Democratic primary. We had a lot of Muslim American voters. Folks like that are making up the fall off in Biden's numbers. And so he's got to bring those folks home. He's really got to do a lot of base persuasion. He and his allies are going to have to lock down those folks before they go after independents and moderates to get back to sea level this time around.
Joel, thank you. Leslie, I want to ask you about, we talked about Joe Biden. He has weaknesses. Donald Trump has weaknesses, too, facing 91 indictments spread over 4 trials. He's been ordered to pay more than $500 million in civil judgments against him. Yet he has had some of the best weeks of his campaign so far, from the Supreme Court to really doing very well in all of these states tonight. What does he need to do tonight? Does he need to unify the party?
I think you're going to hear many Republicans hope that he does that he's magnanimous or is basically extending an olive branch to those disenchanted voters that have supported Haley to this point. If you look at her numbers, and we heard you talking about independents, a part of that is going to be Democrats who are crossing over undeclared into Republican primaries. But there is a highly conflicted group of particularly women in those suburban areas who do not like his character, the chaos surrounding him, or the criminal legal cases that he has against him. And that cross pressure is going to make it really difficult for him to gain that support unless he does some deliberate efforts to refocus them on the economy and on the border.
Those are both interesting points. And of course, we still have 8 months to go before November. Thanks to both of you. We also have CBS reporters spread across the country that are focusing on the key issues and the races in their areas on this Super Tuesday. So let's get a check-in, starting with CBS News political campaign reporter Torian Small. He's in North Carolina.
North Carolina was the only battleground state voting today, and party leaders tell me it's absolutely in play in November. Why? Because it's commonplace to see single-digit margins of victory in statewide races, just like Donald Trump's 2020 win here, where he beat Joe Biden by just over 1 percentage point. This is a purple state, and it's also known to split tickets. That same year, voters elected a Democrat, Roy Cooper, for governor, a Republican, Mark Robinson, for lieutenant governor, and a Democrat, Josh Stein, for attorney general. Stein and Robinson will now face off in a general election gubernatorial contest in November. So the takeaway here is the conventional wisdom of a down ballot effect on either side might not apply when North Carolinians tend to have a swing state of mind. With how Super Tuesday is going up in the Northeast, John Keller is in Boston.
Good evening. If there's any state voting tonight that ought to be fertile ground for Nikki Haley, it's Massachusetts, famous for electing moderate Republicans like former Governor Charlie Baker, a prominent never-Trumper who now heads the NCAA. Haley staged her big local rally this past weekend in Needham, a Boston suburb that was Baker's birthplace. But it's telling that Baker was essentially chased out of the Massachusetts GOP by Trump supporters for whom any Trump critic is a rhino, Republican in name only. Haley faces the same fate tonight in a state where these days the soil can't seem to sustain moderate Republicanism any better than anywhere else. Now it's over to Caroline Cummings in Minneapolis.
Building off momentum in Michigan, there was also an effort in Minnesota to get people to vote uncommitted instead of President Joe Biden as a way to protest the Israel-Hamas war and put political pressure on the White House to call for a permanent ceasefire. But unlike Michigan, activists here tell me that they didn't set any turnout targets, so any votes they would consider a win. But the real victory, they say, is if President Biden gets the message, and they hope a national effort will deliver it to him loud and clear. My colleague Jack Fink in Dallas has an update from Texas.
Thanks, Caroline. Our big race is for U.S. Senate. North Texas Congressman Colin Allred leads a crowded Democratic primary in the polls and may win outright and avoid a runoff. His biggest competitor is State Senator Roland Gutierrez of San Antonio, a progressive Democrat who was the most outspoken state lawmaker for gun restrictions after the tragedy in Uvalde. Allred is more moderate, and he's raised more money than anyone, including Republican incumbent Ted Cruz, who's seeking a third term. While Cruz won a very close race in 2018, analysts say it's going to be an uphill climb for a Democrat to unseat him this year. Border security is the top issue in Texas, and every Republican is running on it this year, but not Democrats. Now let's check in with Gary Dietrich in Sacramento with a look at what's happening in California.
Here are two significant items of note. First, in the presidential race, where the California GOP changed its delegate assignment rules last summer, such that any candidate that gets 50% of the vote plus one takes all of the state's GOP delegates. That thought to benefit Donald Trump and also place the California Republican Party in an even more prominent role nationally. And secondly, our U.S. Senate race, where to the surprise of many, a poll last Friday showed that Republican Steve Garvey had taken the lead in the race. How does that happen, you ask, in a deep blue state? Well, it's because his chief Democratic rival, Congressman Adam Schiff, has spent heavily promoting Garvey's candidacy to the Republican base. Why? Well, because Schiff believes it'll be much easier to defeat a Republican come November. Nora?
Thank you very much. Let's take one more look at the map tonight because Trump has won 11 states at this hour and is expected to do well. That's tight in Vermont, but other than that, he is expected to almost have a clean sweep tonight. And John Dickerson, that's virtually unprecedented.
He's dominated not only this race, which has basically been his since the beginning, but think about what he's done to the Republican Party since 2015. He has remade an entire party, made not only changed positions on things like trade, support for Russia, personal character as either a help or a hindrance to a nomination. He's changed all of these individual ideas within the Republican Party, but he's now made support for him on a number of loyalty tests the sign of whether you're a good Republican or not. That dominance over a party is something that's extraordinary and that we've never seen before.
And he's about to become dominant over the Republican National Committee. Ronna McDaniel will be stepping down at the end of the week. He will install his own candidate, including his daughter-in-law. They have said they will not use those RNC funds for legal bills, but that could always change. And just because Donald Trump says something doesn't mean that that's always true. He follows through on that. So what does that say then about Donald Trump's remaking of the Republican Party?
Well, I think, it says it's thorough, but going back to Bob's earlier point about all of these changes in these individual states, making them winner take all, that in part was the result of spade work done by the Trump forces, which showed that he knew how to do that delicate inside game work, which in 2016 he didn't do. He just blundered in and won everything. But in this case, he's got some tactical success, and that's got to be something that the Biden people worry about.
And yet they've done a poor job of raising money this far. They've had trouble. Trump has had trouble raising money, correct?
And behind the scenes, Trump is meeting with major donors, some of the richest people in the world, including Elon Musk in recent days. CBS News has confirmed he had a private meeting with Musk. He's talking to donors. And here's the thing about the Trump campaign right now. He controls the party, as John said, but he does not control his time. In just weeks, he is going to have to sit in a New York courtroom as that criminal hush money payments to a porn star. That trial begins March 25th.
All right.
Which has only helped him in fundraising to date.
Yeah, coming up, we're going to talk about the issues that matter most to voters and could decide this election. You're watching Super Tuesday right here on CBS.